Nobody moved. Hundreds of people crowded the Manhattan sidewalk. Yet when the drunk man grabbed the little boy by his coat and raised his hand, the entire street seemed to forget how to breathe. The boy was 8 years old. His small hands trembled around an empty cake box. White frosting covered one sleeve of his oversized navy coat, and tears ran silently down his cheeks. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The man looked down at the ruined cake beneath his polished shoes. "Sorry?" His face was red with alcohol. "You ruined my shoes, you little brat." The boy tried to step backward. The man grabbed his collar. A woman nearby pulled out her phone. A businessman looked away. A delivery driver stopped moving. Everyone saw what was happening. Nobody intervened. Then a suitcase dropped onto the pavement. A young woman stepped out of the crowd. She was 27, softly rounded, with chestnut brown hair tucked beneath a simple wool hat. Her brown coat was old around the cuffs, and the suitcase she had been dragging looked almost as tired as she did. She walked directly toward the man. "Let him go." The drunk man laughed. "Mind your own business. He's a child." "And you're what, his mother?" "No," she stepped between them. "But I'm not going to stand here and watch you hurt him." The man looked her up and down. His smile became cruel. "You really think you can stop me?" The woman swallowed her fear. "I don't think it." She looked him directly in the eyes. "I know it." The man raised his hand. And then a deep engine roar rolled down the avenue. One black SUV turned the corner. Then another. Then another. The vehicles stopped so sharply that several people stepped backward. The center door opened. A tall man in a black overcoat stepped onto the street. He was broad-shouldered, dark-haired, and frighteningly calm. 3 bodyguards followed him. The crowd instantly recognized the name whispered between them. Leonardo Costa, the most feared businessman in New York's underworld. His eyes moved across the scene. The broken cake, the frightened boy, the stranger standing protectively in front of him. Then the drunk man. Leonardo's expression became completely still. He walked forward. The boy looked up. "Dad." Leonardo stopped. His voice was quiet. "Samuel." Then he looked at the man who had grabbed his son. "Were you about to touch my son?" The drunk man's face went white, and Abigail Turner suddenly realized that the frightened little boy she had protected was not an ordinary child. He belonged to the most dangerous family in New York. Leonardo removed his coat and placed it around Samuel's shoulders. "Are you hurt?" Samuel shook his head. "My elbow." Leonardo looked down. A scrape covered the boy's skin. Something dangerous flashed in his father's eyes. But he didn't lose control. He simply turned toward his security chief. "Call the police." The drunk man immediately began apologizing. "Mr. Costa, I didn't know." Leonardo interrupted him. "You didn't know he was my son." The man swallowed. "So you believed you had the right to hit him?" 2 bodyguards stepped forward. The drunk man stopped arguing. Samuel moved closer to Abigail. Leonardo noticed. He looked at the woman for the first time. "Who are you?" "Abigail Turner." "Why did you help him?" Abigail glanced at Samuel. "Because nobody else did." Leonardo stared at her. There was no fear in her voice, only exhaustion. Then his eyes fell on the suitcase beside the curb. "You came here with luggage." "Yes, why? I have an appointment." "With whom?" Abigail hesitated. Then she answered. "With you." Leonardo's expression changed. "What?" She reached into her coat and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a letter. Leonardo read the first few lines. His eyes narrowed. 3 months earlier, his younger sister had secretly placed an advertisement searching for a woman willing to enter a practical marriage with a widowed father of 7, not for romance, not for money, for the children. Since his wife's death, Leonardo's mansion had become a beautiful prison. His 7 children were grieving. His business empire was collapsing under enormous debt, and Leonardo had convinced himself that nobody could solve either problem, except perhaps the woman standing in front of him. "You're Abigail Turner?" "Yes, you applied for the position?" "I did." Leonardo looked at her worn coat, then at her old suitcase. "You don't look like someone who came for my money." Abigail gave a tired smile. "That's because I didn't." Samuel looked up at his father. "Dad, can she come home with us?" Leonardo looked at his son, then at Abigail. Something inside him shifted. "Get in the car." Abigail blinked. "Excuse me? You have an appointment." He picked up her suitcase. "It's time for your interview." The Costa estate stood behind enormous iron gates on several acres outside Manhattan. When Abigail stepped inside, she immediately understood why the house felt colder than the winter outside. Everything was perfect. The marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the enormous staircase, the silent servants, but there was no laughter, no warmth, no life. Leonardo led her into the entrance hall. 7 children were watching from the staircase. Julian, 17, stood at the front. He looked so much like his father that Abigail immediately understood why the boy seemed older than his years. Beside him stood Bianca, 15, with long dark hair and guarded eyes. The twins, Felix and Flora, were 12. Theo was 10. Samuel was 8. And little Eliana, 5, held a worn stuffed rabbit against her chest. Leonardo looked at his children. "This is Abigail." Julian crossed his arms. "Why is she here?" Leonardo didn't soften the answer. "She'll be living here." Julian's eyes hardened. "For how long?" Leonardo paused. "She will become my wife." Silence. Bianca looked away. Felix laughed bitterly. Flora pulled Eliana closer. Theo stared at the floor. Samuel simply walked over and stood beside Abigail. Julian's voice became cold. "We already have a mother." Abigail nodded. Yes, the boy looked surprised. Abigail continued. "And no one will ever replace her." Julian studied her. "Then why are you here?" Abigail smiled gently. "To make dinner." Felix rolled his eyes. "We have chefs." "Good," she picked up her suitcase. "Then I won't have to cook everything myself." For the first time, Samuel smiled. Even Leonardo almost did. Almost, Abigail spent her first evening asking questions. Not about grades. Not about behavior. Not about rules. She asked what they liked. Bianca loved tomato soup. Felix liked steak slightly burned. Flora hated onions. Theo loved macaroni and cheese. Samuel wanted another birthday cake for Eliana. Julian claimed he wasn't hungry. Abigail said nothing. That evening she prepared 7 different meals. Nothing extravagant. Nothing worthy of a billionaire's dining room. Just food that reminded 7 lonely children that someone had listened. Julian never came downstairs. Abigail left his plate in the kitchen. If he gets hungry, she told the servant, keep it warm. At midnight, Abigail returned to the kitchen. Julian's plate was empty. The fork had been rinsed. She smiled, but she told no one. The next morning, Felix replaced the sugar with salt while Abigail was baking. She tasted the batter, stopped, then looked at him. Felix waited for punishment. Instead, Abigail smiled. Interesting, she started again. Later, Felix found a pastry waiting outside his room. A note was attached. "Thank you for helping me discover the mistake." He stared at it for a long time. Theo was harder. He avoided Abigail whenever she entered a room. One afternoon, she reached above him for a jar. Theo suddenly raised both hands over his head. Abigail froze. She lowered her hand. Then she sat several feet away. "Who hurt you?" Theo said nothing. Tears appeared in his eyes. Finally, he whispered, "A tutor." Abigail's heart broke. The tutor had been dismissed months earlier. But his words remained. "Your mother died because you were too difficult." Theo looked at Abigail. "Did Mama leave because of me?" Abigail shook her head. "No." She opened her arms. "Your mother fought to stay with you." Theo hesitated. then ran into her arms. "I need to tell you something," he whispered. "What?" "The tutor wasn't the only person who hurt us." Abigail pulled back. Theo looked toward the doorway. "Someone still does." Part 5, The Secret. That night, Abigail told Leonardo. His expression changed immediately. "Who?" Theo didn't know, but he had heard adults talking. They mentioned Sloan Capital. Leonardo became silent. Sloan Capital was the company that had loaned him $300 million after his wife's death. The money had saved Costa Group from collapse. But the debt had somehow grown to nearly $600 million. Leonardo's lawyers had reviewed the contracts. His accountants had reviewed them. His executives had reviewed them. Everyone said the debt was legitimate. Abigail asked to see the contract. Leonardo hesitated. "You understand financial law?" "My father was a forensic accountant." Leonardo looked at her. "What happened to him?" "He refused to falsify financial records for a corporation. And they destroyed his career." She opened the old suitcase. Inside were ledgers, audit reports, tax records, handwritten calculations. Leonardo stared. "You carried all of this to New York?" "It was everything my father left me." She opened the Sloan contract. For 2 hours she read. Leonardo watched her turn page after page. Finally, she stopped. "Here, what?" "This clause." Leonardo leaned closer. "The interest calculation?" "No." She pointed lower. "The principal." Leonardo frowned. "What about it? They can recalculate the principal every month." "So?" "So they've been charging interest on interest." He stared at her. "That can't be legal." "Maybe not." Abigail turned another page. "But that's not the worst part." "What is?" She looked up. "Some of the money you've already paid never went toward your debt." Leonardo's face became cold. "Where did it go?" Abigail looked at the documents. "Back into your company." She paused. "Someone has been using your own money to buy your shares." Leonardo stood. "Who?" Abigail whispered the name. Everett Sloan. Everett Sloan was 52, wealthy, respected, and beloved by New York's financial elite. He hosted charity dinners. He funded hospitals. He appeared on television as a brilliant investor. Nobody would believe he was stealing the Costa empire. That was precisely why he was dangerous. Leonardo wanted to confront him. Abigail stopped him. "If you threaten him, he'll destroy the evidence. He threatened my family. And that's why he expects you to react." Leonardo stared at her. "What do you suggest?" "Let him think we know nothing." A week later, Leonardo took Abigail to Sloan Capital. Everett welcomed them with a smile. When Leonardo introduced Abigail as his future wife, Everett's eyes briefly moved over her old-fashioned dress. "So you found someone to take care of the household." Abigail smiled. "I'm trying to understand my husband's finances." Everett laughed softly. "That's complicated." "Then I'll read slowly." He underestimated her. That was his first mistake. During the meeting, Abigail noticed 12 shell companies. Payments labeled as consulting fees, transfers disguised as management expenses, and something else, a connection between Sloan Capital and a private security firm. She wrote nothing down. She didn't need to. She memorized the details. When they left, she whispered to Leonardo, "He knows we're looking." Leonardo looked at her. "How?" "Because he watched me instead of you." 3 days later, one of Costa Group's warehouses flooded. The fire suppression system had been activated without a fire. Millions of dollars in merchandise were destroyed. Leonardo stood inside the warehouse. His employees waited for him to explode. He didn't. He simply asked, "Who accessed the control system?" "No one knows." Abigail looked at the damaged equipment. "Someone wants you angry." Leonardo turned toward her. "Why?" "Because angry people make mistakes." Then the rumors started. Employees received anonymous messages claiming Costa Group would declare bankruptcy. Clients received false documents. A major shipment disappeared. Then someone hacked the company's payroll system. And finally, the attack became personal. Photographs of Abigail appeared online. Cruel headlines mocked her appearance. They called her a gold digger, a nobody. A woman Leonardo had chosen because no one else wanted her. Abigail pretended not to care. But one night, Leonardo found her alone in the kitchen. Her phone was on the table. Her eyes were wet. He picked up the phone and turned it off. "Don't read them," Abigail whispered. "They've been saying things like that about me my whole life." Leonardo sat opposite her. "Do you know what I see?" She looked up. "I see the woman who protected my son." He continued. "I see the person who brought my children back to life." Abigail's eyes filled with tears. "And I see the woman who may save everything I built." He reached across the table. His fingers touched hers. Neither of them moved. Then Abigail's phone rang. Leonardo answered. His security chief was shouting, "Sir, there's been a breach at the estate." Leonardo stood. "What happened?" The cameras went down. Abigail's heart stopped. "Eliana." They found Eliana asleep in her room. She was safe. But beside her pillow was a white envelope. Inside was a photograph. All 7 children were visible. The picture had been taken outside their school. On the back were 6 words, "Walk away, or they disappear." Leonardo's face changed. He opened his gun safe. Abigail stepped between him and the door. "Don't. Move, no." His eyes were terrifying. "They threatened my children." And that's exactly what they wanted. Leonardo's hand tightened. "I'll end this tonight. If you do, Sloan wins." He stopped. Abigail held up the photograph. "He wants you to become the villain." Leonardo stared at her. "What do you want me to do?" "Let him think we're afraid." She lowered her voice. "Then make him talk." Leonardo slowly closed the safe. "How?" "Give him what he wants." Part 9. The trap. Abigail secretly contacted federal financial investigators through a trusted attorney. She gave them everything. The shell companies, the false payments, the altered contracts, the warehouse connection, the security breach, the threats. Investigators began building a case, but they needed one thing: Everett's confession. So Abigail sent him a message. She wanted to surrender. Everett immediately agreed to meet. He believed she was frightened. He believed Leonardo was losing control. He believed the woman everyone had underestimated was finally breaking. He had never been more wrong. The meeting took place inside Sloan Capital. Abigail entered alone. Everett placed a document on the desk. "Sign this." She looked at it. "What does it say?" "You admit you misunderstood the financial documents. And then you leave New York. What happens to Leonardo?" Everett smiled. "He keeps the house. And the company? I take control." Abigail stared at him. "You planned this from the beginning." Everett's smile disappeared. "Give me your notes." "I didn't bring them." "Then tell me what you found." Abigail stood. "You stole from him. I invested in him. You manipulated the debt. I protected myself. You threatened his children." Everett's face hardened. "Careful." Abigail didn't move. "You were never trying to collect the debt." She looked directly into his eyes. "You were trying to own the Costa family." Everett grabbed her wrist. "Where are the records?" Abigail winced, then smiled. "You're touching the wrong person." The office doors exploded open. Federal agents entered. Leonardo followed them. Everett released Abigail. Leonardo's eyes locked onto his hand. His voice was ice cold. "Take your hand off my wife." Agents immediately placed Everett under arrest. His lawyers arrived. They demanded explanations. Then investigators opened the hidden financial archives. The evidence was overwhelming. Shell companies, false transfers, secret ownership records, bribed employees, manipulated interest calculations, and communications connecting Sloan's network to the warehouse sabotage. Everett's entire empire began collapsing in a matter of hours. He looked at Abigail. "You destroyed everything." She shook her head. "No." Her voice remained calm. "You destroyed it when you believed greed was more valuable than honesty." He was led away in handcuffs. Leonardo watched until the elevator doors closed. Then he turned to Abigail. "Are you hurt?" She looked at her wrist. "Only a little." He gently took her hand. His anger disappeared. "I should have protected you." Abigail smiled. "You did. I almost didn't. But you listened." Leonardo looked at her for a long moment. "You've changed my family." Abigail shook her head. "They changed me too." Months passed. Costa Group survived. The fraudulent debt was overturned. The stolen shares were recovered. Leonardo's company began rebuilding. But the biggest changes happened inside the mansion. Bianca returned to painting. Felix stopped using pranks to hide his sadness. Flora began cooking with Abigail. Theo stopped flinching when people approached him. Samuel became fiercely protective of Eliana. Julian finally started acting like a 17-year-old instead of a grieving father. And Leonardo? He began coming home early. One evening, he found Abigail in the kitchen. "Dinner is almost ready," she said. "I wasn't asking about dinner." She looked at him. "What were you asking?" Leonardo stepped closer. "When are you going to stop calling this a practical marriage?" Abigail smiled. "When you stop treating me like an employee." "I never treated you like an employee." "You did at first." "I was afraid." Abigail's smile faded. "Of me? Of needing you." Silence filled the kitchen. Leonardo took her hand. "I lost my wife." "I know. I thought loving someone again would mean betraying her memory." Abigail squeezed his hand. "It doesn't. I know that now." He leaned closer. "I love you." Abigail's eyes filled with tears. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." She smiled. "Then I love you too." Winter returned to New York. One evening, the entire family gathered around the dining table. There was laughter, arguments, food, noise, everything the mansion had been missing for years. Eliana tugged on Abigail's sleeve. "Mama Abby?" The room became silent. The little girl looked frightened. "Can I call you that?" Abigail's eyes filled with tears. Before she could answer, Bianca reached across the table. "She isn't the only one." Theo nodded. Samuel grinned. Felix laughed. Flora leaned against Abigail. Even Julian stood. He looked at Abigail. "You never replaced our mother." Abigail swallowed. Julian continued. "You gave us something different." "What?" "A family again." He hugged her. One by one, the others joined. 7 children surrounded Abigail. Leonardo watched from the other side of the table. His eyes were wet. Abigail looked at him over their heads. For the first time in years, Leonardo Costa wasn't looking at an empire. He was looking at his home. And Abigail finally understood something. She had come to New York carrying one old suitcase. She thought she was searching for a place where she belonged. Instead, she had found 7 children who needed her. A man who learned how to love again. And a family that chose her. Sometimes the person the world overlooks is the person God has prepared for the moment everyone else is afraid to face. Abigail had been judged by her appearance. Dismissed because of her quiet nature. Underestimated because she didn't arrive wearing designer clothes or carrying a famous name. But she had something money couldn't buy. Courage, compassion, and integrity. She stepped between a frightened child and a man who wanted to hurt him. She never knew that the child belonged to a powerful family. She never knew that one brave decision would change her life. She simply saw someone who needed help. And she helped. Maybe that's what a miracle really looks like. Not always something loud. Not always something impossible. Sometimes it's an ordinary person choosing to do the right thing when everyone else chooses to look away. And sometimes one act of kindness doesn't just change one life. It changes an entire family. If this story touched your heart, Remember Abigail's lesson: never judge someone by what you see on the outside. The person everyone ignores may be carrying the very gift someone else has been praying for. And the smallest act of courage can become the beginning of something extraordinary. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Dark Cradle Night, and share this story with someone who needs a little hope today. May God protect you and your family, fill your home with peace, and give you the courage to stand up for someone when everyone else is standing silent. Amen.